There was once a nation in Africa whose wealth seemed to flow straight from the hands of heaven. A land so blessed that its soil bled gold in the form of oil, and its people spoke of money not as a dream, but as an inconvenience. It was said that in those days a single unit of their currency could stand shoulder to shoulder with the mighty dollar. Their cities glimmered, their ports overflowed, and scholars and workers from distant lands came south, not to teach, but to learn. Many said that this African country was the pride of a continent, the very father of Africa's prosperity. Its name was spoken with reverence in Ghana, respect in South Africa, and envy in Europe. Even the World Bank, yes, that powerful institution that once lent to nations, came knocking at its door. In December of 1974, an extraordinary thing happened. The World Bank signed an agreement with this country not to lend it money, but to borrow. $240 million were taken from the treasury of this African nation to fund the development of other countries. It was the first long-term borrowing operation the World Bank had ever made within Africa. Newspapers around the world called it a symbol of the continent's arrival. But long before the World Bank came with its pen and contract, the story of this nation's rise had begun decades earlier, born from fire and faith. In the early 1960s, after years of colonial rule, the people finally took back their freedom. The Union Jack was lowered and a green and white flag rose to meet the morning sun. Across the land, people wept and cheered. A new nation was born, led by Prime Minister Sir Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, a man whose gentle voice carried the weight of unity. Alongside him stood Chief Obafemi Awolowo, a visionary economist who believed Africa could build modern cities without losing its soul. The world watched as the country found its footing. Then came the gift and curse of oil. In the late 1960s, black gold erupted from the ground in the Niger Delta, and within a few years, the nation's wealth multiplied beyond imagination. When the Civil War ended in 1970, the world expected the country to collapse. Instead, it roared back to life. Under the leadership of General Yakubu Gowon, the army general who took power at just 32, the nation began to rebuild itself from the ashes. Factories rose where battlefields once burned. Highways stretched across once forgotten lands. Schools and universities multiplied. Foreign investors lined up, and international airlines filled their routes to the capital. Money flowed like the rivers of the Niger. During those years, Gowon was said to have uttered a line that would echo through history. The problem of this country is not money, but how to spend it. And he wasn't exaggerating. Oil prices soared after the Arab-Israeli War of 1973, and this African nation became one of the richest in the world. The treasury overflowed. The currency grew so strong that $1 could not match a single unit of it. People traveled to London, to New York, to Paris, and they spent like kings. Imported cars rolled through the streets. Houses and new estates gleamed with marble and Italian tiles. In markets, sellers laughed that no one bargained anymore. Everyone had too much to spend. The country became a beacon for all of Africa. Young men and women from Ghana, Uganda, and Kenya came to study at its universities. South Africans fleeing apartheid found shelter and support within its borders. It was said that in those days, to be African was to look up to this nation, the giant that carried others on its shoulders. Diplomats called it the Black Gold Kingdom. Journalists called it Africa's new superpower. Its leader was welcomed across the world as the face of a continent's future. When the World Bank came in 1974, it was more than a business deal. It was recognition. The world's banker borrowing from Africa. The once colonized, now funding the colonizers' institutions. But the story didn't end there. Wealth brings praise, but it also brings temptation. And like many empires before it, this nation began to drift. Contracts were signed not for progress, but for power. Politicians discovered that the more the treasury grew, the deeper their pockets could become. Foreign companies whispered sweet deals, and local officials listened. Yet even then, the world marveled at its generosity. It gave financial aid to Dubai in 1973, when Dubai itself was still a desert of promise.
This was a country that believed wealth should be shared, that its rise was Africa's rise. People call those the miracle years, when the streets were filled with optimism and a young graduate could walk into a government office and find a job the same week. The airports buzzed with flights, the cities pulsed with dreams. To be born in that land then was to believe you were destined for greatness. And yet, deep beneath the surface, something fragile was cracking. The cracks began quietly. They were not seen in the glass towers of Lagos or the oil rigs of Port Harcourt. They began in hearts, in the slow erosion of discipline, the fading of purpose, and the rise of greed. By the late 1970s, the same oil that had blessed the nation began to curse it. This is Voices of the Forgotten, where Africa's buried truths rise again. The world market shifted, prices dropped, and the river of money that had flowed endlessly began to dry up. But the government did not slow its spending. Contracts kept coming, projects kept rising, and debts began to form like invisible ghosts in the background. When General Murtala Mohammed came into power in 1975, he tried to change course. He was young, bold, and deeply patriotic. He spoke of cleaning the system, restoring dignity, and cutting waste. For a brief moment, hope returned. People cheered as he walked through the streets without fear or convoy. He was called the People's Soldier. But that hope was short-lived. His life was cut down by bullets in a coup just 1 year later. The nation mourned, but life went on. Under Olusegun Obasanjo, who took over afterward, the country continued its international generosity. It sent engineers to other African countries, funded peacekeeping missions, and even helped build schools beyond its borders. To outsiders, it still looked like the giant that could never fall. But within, corruption was eating through the walls. A generation that never knew scarcity was learning how to waste. Politicians competed not for service, but for status. The oil money that once built roads now built mansions. The factories that once produced goods began to rust. Import became easier than production, and dependence replaced innovation. By the 1980s, the country's currency began to weaken. The naira, that once stood shoulder to shoulder with the dollar, began to bow its head. Each year, its pride fell lower. By the time General Ibrahim Babangida came into power in 1985, the country was no longer lending, it was borrowing. The irony was painful. The same nation that once gave $100 million to Russia was now negotiating loans to pay its civil servants. The same people who once declared that money was too much now struggled to afford bread. And the world watched in silence. Foreign experts arrived again, this time not as guests, but as advisors. They came with charts, conditions, and plans called structural adjustment. The people called it something else: suffering without end. Inflation rose, jobs vanished, the universities that once drew students from across Africa began to decay. Skilled workers fled abroad, chasing the dreams their fathers had lived. Those who stayed behind whispered in disbelief. How could a nation so rich fall so far?
There were moments of light, brief sparks of promise. In the 1990s, the country still had brilliance, writers, musicians, dreamers who refused to give up. But the weight of corruption, coups, and mismanagement grew heavier each year. And so, the mighty fell. The fall wasn't sudden. It was slow, almost graceful, like a lion growing old and forgetting its own roar. The world that once begged for its loans began to pity it. The young men who once dreamed of working in its factories now dreamed of escaping them. And the women who once traded gold and fabric in bustling markets began to sell hope instead. Today, many still remember the words of Yakubu Gowon, "The problem is not money, but how to spend it." And they wonder, was it pride, greed, or fate that turned the river of abundance into a drought of despair? Whatever the reason, the truth remains. This country once stood as a pillar of Africa's greatness, a land that gave when others begged, a land that lent to the World Bank, to Britain, to India, a land that sent aid to Dubai and gifts to Russia, a land whose people walked tall, proud of their green passport. But now its story is told in past tense, not because it is over, but because it must remember. For history is not a grave, it is a mirror. And when a nation forgets its reflection, it begins to fade. So tonight, when you hear the name Nigeria, do not think only of its troubles or its politics. Remember the time when it was the hope of a continent, when its voice carried power, when the World Bank knocked at its door not to save it, but to borrow from it. And perhaps in that remembrance, something will awaken again. Maybe, just maybe, the giant will rise. How the mighty fell, they whisper. But some of us still believe the mighty can rise again.
The day Nigeria gets it right, that is the day Africa wakes up. If Africa is going to realize the potential, the positive aspects of our culture must be given their pride of place. Those of you who are from Nigeria, I've said it times without number when I'm in Nigeria, whether I'm in Nasarawa or in Kaduna or in Anambra or in Bayelsa, I keep on saying the day Nigeria gets it right, that is the day Africa wakes up. You only have to read the story of the early years of Nigeria during the days of the great Zik of Africa. Many of you do not know that Nnamdi Azikiwe was called the great Zik of Africa because he loved the continent, as indeed did Abubakar Tafawa Balewa. And you may not know, you Nigerians, in 1970, the king of Saudi Arabia was sick and went to be treated at the hospital in Ibadan.